What's up, guys? We are back with another Mythic Legion's Necronominus wave review, taking a look at one of the meatless monstrosities, the TURPICUli. I am very, very excited about this thing because, I don't know, look at it. It's a skeleton monster with all sorts of crazy nonsense hanging off of it. It very much is right up my alley. This is a more deluxe style figure because of all this extra stuff that he comes with. He's got what looks like wings, he's got some crazy tail, the whole 9 yards, and as a result he does come in the double wide style packaging. So you got him there in the window with the full spread. You've got a faction card on one side, you've got a bio on the other, and then the back of the package gives us cross-sell for some other bad guys in this wave, our write-up, and then the full spread of that Nate Barch artwork featuring the Dark Four. So yeah, let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Mythic Legion's TURPICUli. This is easily, and you'd probably question why I didn't tackle this guy sooner, but it's easily one of the figures I was most curious about with this wave. There's some figures that I wanted to get to sooner, but this thing has been definitely at the top of my list for, well, I guess a couple years now, and I bought a handful of these, and I'm very happy that I did because this thing turned out to be, it turned out to be as fun as I wanted, but once you get it in hand, it's different than just theorizing, well, how cool is this figure going to be 2 years from now? So this thing is a lot of fun. It's very weird, but it's also going to be one of those that, especially if you're into popping and swapping, this is one of the figures to get. And when I say one, I mean you get like 4 or 5 probably. It's going to be interchangeable with other figures in this wave because he uses the same bone color as Maxilius. And you can swap those parts. He's not exactly the same kind of figure. A lot of the parts here are the same, but he's not just a skeleton Legion Builder 2 like Maxilius is. He has a more traditional build, but he's still got a lot of new parts. He's obviously got a whole bunch of stuff ratcheted on his back. It's a weird, grotesque figure. I really like it. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. No real surprises here, but he does move really, really well. And we, of course, have to talk about what's different. So you've got a head that can look up slightly. This is probably the one thing on the figure in terms of articulation I'm not a big fan of. There's all these spikes coming out of the back of the neck, and that just stops the head from going up any further. He looks down good, tilt side to side, rotation. Neck also swivels too, but it's not really helpful. You've got arms that go out, of course. They swivel. You've got single jointed elbows, really great range though now because we've got those newer bone arms, swivel, swivel and hinge. Of course, there's no swiveling wrist or anything like that. You've got free floating bangles now. We do have a different style torso than we're used to seeing. This is more in line, I guess this is more in line with Necronominus than with the Skeleton Legion Builder 2, where it's a normal torso and it has a bunch of guts up in there, and then there's this little half belt that covers it so you can kind of keep it seamless, I guess. So you got tilt side to side, you got swivel back and forward. Just watch that belt, it can kind of get stuck. He also, I should mention, does have a hinged jaw on multiple heads that he has. We've got legs that go out. They kick forward and backward. No thigh cut on skeleton legs. That's a long-standing thing for this line. We've got the new knees, which have a really great amount of range there. You've, of course, got swivel. And then you've got swivel at the ankle going up into the calf. You've got hinge, and you've got rocker at the ankles. So for all intents and purposes, in that regard, very, very normal figure until you see this mess that's on his back. And I'd say mess, but in like the best way, because it makes him into something very weird and different. That said, a lot of this stuff is still very normal. It's nothing really weird. It's just a lot. So you've got these little chicken wings on his back. They go into the pauldron holes. So you got hinge and swivel there. Nothing else on them moves. We've got these larger arms, and that's what these are. They're just arms that just happen to be absolutely enormous. So I'm quite certain we're going to see these somewhere else, unless I've forgotten that these are already coming on a different figure. It makes me think, brute skeleton or something like that, because they're huge. What's great about these, outside of the fact that they are fully articulated, so swivel and hinge there, swivel and hinge there, and swivel and hinge at the wrist, these can be put into the shoulders. So if you want to make this thing into more like a gorilla type of setup where he's got really big arms and you can kind of hunch him over on the ground, you can do that and throw the smaller arms on his back, or, not use them at all, depending on what you want to do. And then we've got a tail back here. So as usual, there's the connection piece that goes into the butt plate. And then there's a swivel at this point here where this meets that. And then you've got a wired bendy tail, which in typical fashion for the Horsemen, like this is super, super bendy. Don't get too crazy with it because you can, pop the wire out if you get really nuts with it. But there's a lot of potential in terms of just, shimmying that thing around. So as usual, it's very, very expressive and works really well. I think this thing is a lot of fun to pose around just because there's so much stuff on him. There's a lot of different possibilities in terms of poses with or without some of these pieces. But when he's fully kitted out, there's a lot of things to play with on this figure, and he does move really well. At the same time, I think he is visually, well, probably a little bit more exciting, really, visually than anything else. And a lot of this is going to come down, at least for me, and I'm sure the greater Legions community, is the pop and swap aspect of this figure. So I've got a few of these guys. I'm definitely going to have, at least in the pictures at the end, various builds of different types of this thing, because there's a lot you can do with it. And we're certainly going to have the ability to do more as we get other parts down the road. There's a heads pack coming in All-Star 6. You can easily, if you really want to get stupid with it, you can use the Maxilius body because he's the same color here. You can mix and match a lot of this stuff in between these two figures. If you wanted to throw a regular skeleton head on this, you can use the extra head from Maxilius. If you want to use this head, you can do that. If you want to, give smaller sets of arms or give Max the bigger arms or do something with it, you've got a lot of potential there. But I think just at face value, if you build this thing out with the, we'll say this is the default full loadout, I guess, with the big arms on the back, with the little chicken wings up there, this thing looks absolutely gnarly. I really like it. It's nasty. It's weird. I don't want to say it's unsettling in the sense that it bothers me, but it's kind of an unsettling design. It's meant to be humanoid, but not exactly humanoid, and I think that's pretty much what they're going for here. It's to evoke something that looks vaguely human, but is obviously not, and if this thing had some meat on his bones, he'd be absolutely terrifying. So I really think this thing is just cool and fun, although that's the best way to say it. Cool and fun, and that's really where I'm going to start and stop with it. He does utilize overwhelmingly a lot of our normal current skeleton parts, and I say current because these are still relatively new. These arms and the legs, we've got the skeletal feet here. What I really like about this guy though is how they managed to keep him from not just being a skeleton Legion builder too by doing this stuff with the torso. So like it's really hard to show. I mean, maybe I can get a picture up in there. But there's a bunch of gunk and like guts and stuff inside of his torso, and that's covered by this belt buckle here. And the belt buckle is not just to, cover some of that. It's to fill in that void to make him look a little bit more seamless, because he doesn't have the normal, or when I say normal, I mean the new hip bones. He doesn't have this piece here at the crotch. He has a regular, like a classic crotch piece, and that's covered by this belt piece, and it's covered with this belt piece inside the torso. So it's a pretty ingenious way to keep him as a more standard skeleton, I guess, and still cover up a lot of that stuff so he still looks very seamless in that regard. I really like the tail. Like, this thing looks like it doesn't belong with some of these other parts. A lot of this thing does seem like it's very cobbled together, and that's obviously what they're going for in terms of its overall design. It's got weird proportions. It's got a standard loadout of parts from a skeleton's perspective, but then it's got these wings on the back, and then it's also got these giant arms. So what did this thing actually look like? Did it ever look like anything else? Or was it only a skeleton from start to stop? And then you've got a very, animal, beastly type of skull here, which really throws the whole thing into just this crazy town kind of space where it's what possibilities exist for this thing by virtue of it being some sort of, beast skeleton type of creature. So I really like this. The only thing that kind of throws me off when I look at this is these hands. They look really, really weird to me, like that on his back. Something about it, I don't know, looks like I've got him like flexing or something, which I guess is funny. But I think these arms will also look just as cool when they're on the shoulders. So when they're normal arms for him, you can have him being this very top-heavy gorilla type of setup, in addition to having the winglets on. Or if you don't want to do that, that's kind of one of the cool aspects of this figure, in addition to everything else, is just that you don't have to use all this stuff. So whenever I finally get all of these set up, I don't intend to have them all like this. I intend to have them, to be various type of things. They're not supposed to be cookie cutter, the same thing over and over again. They're slightly different. They have different looks and different styles and different body parts and different appendages and all sorts of stuff. So the possibilities with this thing, I think, is going to be really cool to see what people do with it. But even if you're not into that, just throw everything on him. It looks absolutely fantastic. The sculpt is, a lot of it is very familiar to us. not a lot of new parts here in terms of stuff. You know, the overwhelming base body is very familiar to us, but it's still relatively new. And it just looks great together. This works really well to sell the idea of this beastly, grotesque skeletal creature that has awkward proportions, really weird appendages that don't seem to go together, and something that would absolutely scare the hell out of you if you ever encountered it in real life. I really, I guess I can't say it enough, I really like this thing. Now for accessories, the Turpiculi is really loaded, and this is another one of those figures that's like two halves of what make up their accessories. The first half we've essentially already talked about, and that's the big pop and swap aspect of this figure, to mix and match all these extra weird parts to make your own grotesque sort of creature. So you've got the big arms and hands, we've got the chicken wing bones, you've got the tail, so you can mix and match and do whatever you want there, and that does take up a lot of what we would consider this guy's accessories. But for the purposes of review, you know, obviously I wanted to sort of talk about them all at once, since they do provide some articulation, they change up his look and all that sort of stuff. But even at face value with just that stuff, I feel like he's already overloaded compared to a lot of figures because of all the stuff that you get to put on this guy. We do, of course, get an extra head sculpt. This is another beast style of head. No horns on this one. Very feline in nature to me. Of course, fully painted. It's got all that muck and grime in there, the dark sunken eye sockets. It's got a big crack down the front. The jaw does open and close, so just like the other head, it does have a movable jaw. And I really like this one. I'm not sure which one I prefer. I'm going to use both because I have a decent number of these things, so I'm definitely going to use both. I feel like I kind of lean towards the one with the horns more, but at the same time, I'm not. Maybe I like them just the same. They're both great. They're both disgusting. I'm happy with them. We do get some extra hands also to go along with the various sets of arms. So of course we've got fists. Basically, they're essentially fists for the big hands. You could shimmy a certain kind of sword in there if you need to, and then you've got gripping hands on the little hands. And then you get two sets of style posy hands for each. So you've got the big ones, you've got the little ones, and of course you get two hands. They're both lateral sets of hinges, so they'll shimmy in and out, side to side. And then we also, of course, get some actual weapons, and these are fairly basic. Like, we've certainly seen these before, but they're a little bit more, I don't know, brutal in nature, I guess is the best way to say it, because they use bone components. They seem very hard edge in many ways. So this seems fitting to me, even if you feel like you don't necessarily need accessories with this guy. I feel like he can stand apart without them. It's going to be nice to have a few on your shelf with some weaponry. So you've got this kind of cleaver weapon. Again, we've seen all of this stuff a number of times, just always done up in a slightly different way. And then you get two of these. I don't know what you would consider this. I don't know what kind of sword this is with the weird angle blade, but I really like this one. Something about that does it for me. And then you've got another bone hilt, like a hip bone, like to socket into the hip, which I always think is cool to see on these kind of characters, on the more monstrous type of figures, to get something like this where they're utilizing body parts in the structure of their weapon. That's particularly nasty, so that works fairly well here and goes along with the idea of what this thing is. So he is, in many ways, very overloaded. You've got a handful of what we'll call traditional accessories, but then you have a whole mess of stuff that you can bolt onto this figure, or if you're not wanting to use it on this guy, of course, mix and match with other figures. So yeah, overall, I mean, I really like this thing. I don't know, I think I have 5 or 6 of them so far. I don't have them all in hand yet, but I think I have 5 or 6 at this point coming or here, and I'm really happy with this thing. Very happy for how many I bought. So many years ago at this point, I'm happy to see in hand that this thing is as fun and weird and cool as I thought it was going to be. I'm infinitely more excited about this figure having finally gotten this one out of the box and messed around with it, seeing these weird, large skeletal arms, how this body works in conjunction with some of this stuff. Because again, this guy is basically just a Skeleton Legion Builder 2, but he's also very different at the same time, and you can use him to mix and match parts with Maxilius or with Necronominus, and you can kind of mix and match and build whatever kind of skeleton creature you want. But I think just straight right out of the package, this thing is going to be a lot of fun for folks. So that's going to do it for this look at the Mythic Legion's Necronominus Wave Turpiculi. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.